Grace, peace, and mercy from God our Father and the Lord Jesus. I want to talk to you today about something that's, it's real. You see it on the news. You see these stories, particularly what happened or what's been happening, these mass shootings. And you see, push for gun control. And, it's my personal belief that there's a whole nother agenda behind these shootings, behind gun control itself. And that, according to the Constitution, if it applies to this country, that, the people have a right to bear arms, okay? That right should not be infringed, and that they should, even be allowed to form a militia. That's what the Second Amendment says. And it's to guard against tyranny of government. Now, that's what it says, but I'm speaking particularly to a people who the Constitution, sometimes has not benefited, or it has not been a benefit to us, and who it has stated that we were 3/5 of a human being at one point. And that's the so-called African American in this country. And I want to talk about specifically black people and gun control and violence in our communities. I want to look at the history of gun control just for briefly, the hypocrisy right now, and how we could use the Bible to actually curb a lot of this violence. Okay, so I just want to read something here, just some facts. If you go all the way back, okay, racist arms laws predate the establishment of the United States. And this is from an article I found entitled The Racist Roots of Gun Control. Thought it was pretty interesting. I said racist arms laws predate the establishment of the United States. Starting in 1751, the French Black Code required Louisiana colonists to stop any blacks and, if necessary, beat any blacks carrying any potential weapon such as a cane. If a black refused to stop on demand and was on horseback, the colonist was authorized to shoot to kill. Okay, that was in 1751. In 1803, when the first U.S. official arrived in New Orleans in 1803, I'm skipping around this article, to take charge of this new American possession, the planners sought to have the existing free black militia disarmed and otherwise exclude free blacks from positions in which they were required to bear arms, including such non-military functions as slave catching crews. Okay, 1831, it says, understandably, restrictions on slave possession of arms go back a very long way. While arms restrictions on free blacks predated, these restrictions increased dramatically after Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831, a revolt that caused the South to become increasingly irrational in its fears, like now. Irrationality is running rampant. Okay, I'll touch on that briefly. 1843, other decisions during the antebellum period were unambiguous about the importance of race. In State versus Huntley in 1843, the North Carolina Supreme Court had recognized that there was a right to carry arms guaranteed under the North Carolina Constitution, as long as such arms were carried in a manner not likely to frighten people. The following year, the North Carolina Supreme Court made one of these decisions whose full significance will not appear until after the Civil War and the passage of the 14th Amendment. It read, an 1840 statute provided that if any free Negro, mulatto, or free person of color shall wear or carry about his or her person or keep in his or her house any shotgun, musket, rifle, pistol, sword, dagger, or bowie knife, unless he or she shall have obtained a license therefore from the Court of Pleas and Court of Sessions of his or her county within 1 year preceding the wearing, keeping, or carrying thereof, he or she shall be guilty of a misdemeanor and may be indicted therefore. And that's just some examples of racist gun control in this country, even predates this country, and you can go on and on. Now, when it comes to black people and gun control, this is an example of how leaders have led us astray. We had these so-called black leaders. Many of us are in an urban setting. Many of us are victims of violent crime. And therefore, many of us feel that we are proponents of gun control. However, statistics show, number one, gun control does not alleviate violence, because only law-abiding citizens follow gun control legislation. Criminals, by definition, are lawless. Therefore, they don't follow the law. That's number one. Number two, statistics show that places that have more guns are actually have less crime, because criminals understand that somebody can be carrying that they want to victimize, so they are less prone to attack that person. Okay, that's number two. Number three, these buyback programs don't alleviate crime. Okay, it doesn't. It's illogical for the most violated people, as far as gun crime, to get rid of guns or talk about getting rid of guns, because it is only with a gun in today's society in which one can defend themselves. I know personally of the fact that things that have happened in my life. Well, I'll just give you an example. Living in a bad neighborhood, men tried to break in my house. 3, I'm not that big a stature. Okay, it was only through having something to defend myself with that I was able to thwart the threat. I had family there that were vulnerable, and I was able to protect them from guys trying to break in my house at 3 in the afternoon on a Sunday. Okay, call the police, but the police are simply the ones that respond. Okay, they respond after the crime has already been committed. So, had I not been there with that firearm, perhaps loved ones of mine could have been harmed, or I could have been harmed. Okay, so that's just an example I know firsthand of how a weapon can protect you. Okay, again, black people talking about gun control, you're not going to be protected. Okay, you're not going to be protected. And I'm going to get into what could stop it, and it's not gun legislation. It's not at all. And I have my own. I'm not even going to get into what I think that really is all about. Number 2, it's hypocritical on so many levels for all these tears to be shed now because of what's happened in Sandy Hook. And they should. You know, that's a terrible, horrific thing. But when I have to be honest, when I looked at the president and I looked at others, you know, shedding tears for these children, which they should be shedding, it was a travesty. I asked myself this question: where are the tears for these kids, these black kids that have been shot down like dogs all over the city? And somebody say, well, that's a good reason to get rid of guns. Again, gun legislation is not going to get rid of guns. What's going to cause is black market and complicate the drug war, the so-called drug war. And it's going to make things worse because you're not going to be able to protect yourself. Depending on how far they can go with this attack on the Second Amendment. But when I saw those tears, I thought about those that died, those 176 or so children, not hundreds more, innocent, that were innocent civilians that died in drone attacks. You see, America's a violent place. This is a violent world. This country particularly was based on violence, particularly violence against black people. And how is it, it's hypocritical that the president, to me, would cry over these children, but not cry over those children that are these young people, young black boys and girls, young with all this potential, that are dying in this old stomping grounds in Chicago or all over. It indicates, or that certain life is more valuable than other life. All right? Now, so that's the hypocrisy that I just had to comment on, because it's just blatant. Now, how do you alleviate gun violence? It's real simple. get back to the book. Think about back in the day, many of us, again, we're not too far removed from farms, being on a plantation where grandpa, big daddy, or your papa or father had a gun or a pistol. Nobody was going shooting up everybody. We have gotten so far away from moral values and principles, particularly the laws and statutes and commandments of God, that our children are liable to do anything. See, when you have children, you're supposed to bring them up. It's just like on a farm when you plant a seed. You have to water it, okay? You have to plow that field. Why? Because you want to make sure, you have to weed it, you have to make sure that what comes up is nourished and reaches its potential. And that's what we're not doing as a people. So I just want to read something. And this is Deuteronomy the 6th chapter. This is Deuteronomy the 6th chapter. And here Moses talks about something that we should all take heed to in regard to bringing up our children. This is Deuteronomy the 6th chapter, verse 1. It says, "Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land whither you go to possess it." So he's saying, look, I've given you the law, statutes, and commandments of God that he gave me. These are what you should keep when you go over Jordan. Verse 2, "That thou mightest fear the Lord thy God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments which I command thee, thou and thy son and thy son's son, all the days of thy life, and that thy days may be prolonged." So if you want prolonged life, you keep the law, statutes, and commandments of God. See, and that's what we're not being taught. And a lot of this, you see a lot of these ministers in these gun buyback programs and talking about getting rid of guns. First of all, you'll never get rid of these guns. But what you can do is get rid of a certain mindset, and you wash the mind with the water of the word. But they're too busy with their own agenda, promoting false religion, false doctrine. They're not teaching people the law, statutes, and commandments of God in these churches. And that's the problem. That's the problem. Verse 3. "Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with thee, and that ye may increase mightily, as the Lord God of thy fathers hath promised thee, in the land that floweth with milk and honey." He said, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might." And listen to what he says here. "And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart," or in the mind. So keep it in your mind. He says, "And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children." Teach what? The law, statutes, and commandments of God. See, if we were teaching the law, statutes, and commandments of God, do you think these children will be going out trying to get a gun, trying to kill somebody? Yeah, you may have these anomalies that go out and do that. But for the most part, if that was done in our communities, you wouldn't have the violence in our communities. See, it's not the gun. Somebody had to pick up the gun, and somebody had to put bullets in the gun, somebody had to pull the trigger and aim it at somebody else. That's a mindset to kill and violence. But if we had the law, statutes, and commandments of God to govern ourselves, we would have peace. "And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children." So you're supposed to teach them diligently. You know, it's not just a one-time thing, it's a consistent thing. "And shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up." So ask yourself this question: how often do you talk to your children about the Word of God? How often do you teach them the laws, the statutes, the commandments of God? How often do you discuss with them the teachings of the Messiah? Or do you allow them to watch anything on television? Do you allow them to fill their minds with violence and misogyny in the music today, in the materialism? Do you allow them to watch Housewives of Atlanta and all kind of violence on TV and violent video games? See, that's a problem. You should be teaching them the law, statutes, and commandments of God. And I guarantee if we were doing that, we wouldn't have the violence on our city streets. Thou shalt, verse 7, thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and thou shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. See, they're supposed to be taught to us. Let's go to Proverbs. Proverbs, the 22nd chapter, and verse 6. Listen to the wisest man to ever live, Solomon. Proverbs 22 and 6 reads, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Now, you often hear that talked about. You hear older people, you know, that may be some catchy line in a Tyler Perry movie. But what does it actually mean? What's the way in which they should go? On that way of holiness, that righteous path, that path that is lined with the law, statutes, and commandments of God. That's the way they should go. And the law, statutes, and commandments of God are written in the law. You read the Old Testament, particularly those laws in Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Okay? Those laws are still good, but you go to church today, they tell you those laws are no more. No, we shouldn't be sacrificing animals. Obviously, Jesus was the ultimate sacrifice. But we should be keeping those laws, statutes, and commandments. We should be honoring his feast days. we should not be dealing in idolatry. We should know how to love our neighbor, love our brother and our sister, not lusting, not committing adultery, not committing fornication, not killing. Not killing. So it says, train up a child in the way he should go. That's why Moses, he suggested long back then. Actually, it's a commandment. He told us, he said, listen, teach this to your children. Teach it to your children. Ask yourself, are you teaching it to your children diligently? You know, even going to church, you're not hearing about the law, statutes, and commandments of God. Think about what they're talking about. It's all entertainment. You got praise dancing and some good singing and some emotionalism and half a verse. And then you go on to listen to what some false preacher is telling you. And he has not even told you enough to that you know that you on there on Sunday. You in there on Sunday. That's the wrong day of the week. You're supposed to be on the Sabbath day. That's the fourth commandment. But see, nobody's teaching the commandments, so nobody knows. Or nobody's taking heed. Or that he's lied to you saying, well, that's done away with. Even though Jesus, that was his custom. And to keep the Sabbath. You read that in Luke 4. Or even Paul, that was his custom. See, the Lord doesn't change. That points to, Sabbath points to a day of rest that we're still trying to enter into. You read that in Hebrews. Time of peace. That's a whole nother lesson. So train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he shall not depart from it. Let's go to Proverbs, the 13th chapter, because there's something else that goes along with teaching your child what they should do. You have to teach a child. You can't just buy them Jordans and expect everything to be okay and show your love that way. Or buy some $500 video game system or some $500 iPhone 4, 5, or 6, whatever number we're on right now. See, it's not about the material things. Or you shouldn't be allowing a TV set to babysit your children. Or you shouldn't be allowing a school to indoctrinate your children to give your child the values. Because those are not godly values that are being perpetuated in many of the schools in America. So this is Proverbs, the 13th chapter, and verse 24. Now, this is what we've gotten away from. It says, he that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes, or early, meaning you have to sometimes physically discipline a child. Now, that is something that is looked upon as something that's frowned upon now, and you hear the rhetoric behind it. You hear, well, this study shows this. Listen, particularly, I'm speaking of black folks, if you do not discipline your children, they will, out of love, they will be disciplined by the police out of hatred. You know that, and I know that. If we don't discipline our children, we leave it up to society to discipline our children. We leave it up to the police to beat our children. We leave it up to the juvenile detention centers to abuse our children. We leave it up to others to do this to our children. If we don't do it, and we need to do it early, just like we need to teach them early. See, you shouldn't just discipline a child or physically discipline a child if a child doesn't know. They have to be taught. See, that's the first step. You have to teach a child. But even this mindset is crazy because you know, even sometimes a child is not even at the level of understanding. So that they have to take physical discipline to teach that child. It's like a child trying to touch a hot stove. You smack that hand and tell them no. You don't take some barbed wire and beat them with it. That's abuse. But you do that. You physically discipline children out of love, and you save their life. Let's go to Hebrews, the 12th chapter. Hebrews, the 12th chapter. Just to put this in perspective. Hebrews, the 12th chapter, and this is verse 6. Hebrews 12 and 6, it says, "For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth." So even the Lord chastises us. Even the Lord chastises us and scourges every son whom he receiveth. So if you a son of his, he's going to chastise you. Verse 7. "If ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the father chasteneth not?" A real father will chastise his son when he's wrong. And that's part of the problem. You want to get rid of gun violence? You need a father in the home. And that goes into a whole other thing. But you need a father in the home. Women cannot raise sons to be men as they should if a father was there. What I mean by that is all, and the mothers, particularly black mothers, have been holding our race, nation rather, up. They have been making a way out of no way. Okay? You always hear, "I'm mama and daddy." Be honest with you, that's not even possible. That's not even possible. You could do, and I'm not saying a woman can't raise a boy to become a man and a productive citizen, but for the most part, that's not what's happening. That is not what's happening. What you have is you have a lot of effeminized young men. What you have is you have a lot of men young boys who don't know how to be men because they don't see the example. That's like me trying to teach a daughter or my daughter how to be a woman. Yes, I can tell from a male's perspective and from a biblical perspective what should, hey, you shouldn't wear that because a boy might look at you a certain way. But there are certain things about being a woman that I simply don't understand. Same thing with being a man. Same thing with being a man. It's not some kind of machismo thing. It's a reason why it take a man and a woman to bring a child in the world, because it take a man and a woman to raise a child. So not just the sons need their fathers, but these daughters need their fathers. And see, so that's the issue. That's the issue. But he says, "If ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof are all partakers, then are ye bastards and not sons." So even I read that to point out that chastening, even the Lord chastises us. And sometimes that chastening could be much worse than a smack on the wrist physically. Okay? It could be anything because God controls everything. So that's the problem. That's the issue in our communities with the violence. That's the issue. We need to get back to basics, Bible basics, and use this book. Use this book not as a dust collector, but as a guide to living if we want a better future for our children and if we want the gun violence to cease in our communities. That's what we need. Not gun control. We need Bible.